So I'd arranged a night out with my friends to a local bar, very unpretentious, relaxed place, where you have a few drinks, and the more drunk you get, you migrate to the back of this venue where they've got the club area. And this is where we ended up getting a really nice seated area on the left-hand side. And a friend of mine went to go and get a round of drinks. And it's at this point that my friend offered me a very powerful painkiller anesthetic that you can take, and again, it helps with anxiety. But you should never mix this with alcohol. And I knew this, but I still took some of this very powerful anesthetic. But as I inhaled this, I knew instantly something wasn't right. My peripheral vision started to darken, and I knew my blood pressure was dropping, and I collapsed very quickly. And now I wasn't aware of this because I was already passed out, but my friends had said that I quickly went into respiratory failure. Now, I was totally unaware of all of this because I was instantly transported to another realm. I was suspended within this huge coliseum, and I was actually suspended in the air in between these two massive columns. But the columns went, miles and miles from either side, and the coliseum was behind me. There were stairs, like 1,000 stairs that were coming up to this coliseum. And the coliseum was made of this brilliant light that I would explain. But a most important part of this suspended in the air was I had this incredible presence on my right-hand side. Now, I had no physical form at this time. I can only assume that I was this beam of energy that I felt a part of this greater light. Now, the energy that I had here on my right-hand side was very overpowering, very comforting, and I had no idea what that feel was. If I didn't have 360-degree perception, I would have just assumed that I was against one of these huge columns that I was in between. But there was nothing behind me, so I don't know if it was my higher self, a spirit guide, or part of your soul family. Now, going back to the light, the brilliant light there, the only way that I've learned to explain it is when you're in a science class and you have a prism, and you talk about refraction, the light shines through this prism. So you have the beam of light, and you have the rainbow that manifests within it. And it's that incredible mixture of this beautiful white light with color within it. And that is what I could see, but it was a very intense bright light that just absorbs you, but isn't uncomfortable to be around. I would call that the universe or God. I really think it was so immense, and that was what emitting that feeling of peace and comfort. And when you explain about the Colosseum that was there, which was made of light, but the light it's so difficult to explain, it's frustrating. But if you think about on the earthly realm, there's the infrared and ultraviolet light, but we can just see a tiny fraction of that. And then in this realm, it must have just exploded that I had that full range. And another way that I've explained it before is a pearl within an oyster. It's that beautiful white color, but you can see that pink and purple within it. But just imagine going to that full spectrum of infrared and ultraviolet. It's just a magnificent color that is just, it's comforting. It's almost like a liquid. You're in this water-filled flow of comfortness, and it's the peace and the love and that unconditional love. People say it's like going home. Now, I was greeted by these 4 magnificent beams of energy that were, I'm going to say in front of me, but, the perception was all around me. I knew instantly who they were. There was no physical features, but just either from their vibration or just from their frequency, I knew who they were. The first 3 beams were children who died on the ward over those coming weeks. So 2 of them were infants, and one was a 3-year-old girl. The communication there was way beyond telepathy. It was just this knowing and understanding everything about them. There was no dialogue at all. I'd love to say that we had this conversation, but it really wasn't about that. It was just about their greater journey. And I had a greater understanding of what their life journey or their soul journey. It was very little reference to their time on earth. And I still believed they were there to let me know that it was okay to let go and that it was okay to move on. That was a message that I did feel was important because, why would they bother coming to greet me when I had such a small part of my life on the ward? Now, the 4th beam of energy was my best friend who had passed away 6 months before. And the communication with him was slightly different. Again, he was no physical form, but I was able to, I just knew it was him just from whatever the frequency was. because we did have that connection on earth, the connection with him was slightly different and it did feel different. I remember having a specific thought, because he was an atheist, that he was actually hearing this incredible, magnificent beam of energy. Now, beyond these 4 beams of energy that were in front of me, there were still thousands and thousands of these beams of magnificent energies. And it's so difficult to explain because they were huge. If you think about the cedar trees that you have in Yosemite, these massive trees, they were just magnificent and just vibrating in a way that you get this connectedness around them. And it's so real because, like I said, this was 16 years ago. And you will have vivid dreams sometimes, but to remember this in the detail that I had, and the fact that I was obsessed with this place for months afterwards, I just could not get out of my head this incredible realm. But it's not what people say, it's how they make you feel. And that's what I felt up there is what made it so special. Now, behind me as well, there were also these beams within the Colosseum. And again, this is very difficult to explain, but we were all just connected by this. It's like almost like a thread of light or love that everything was connected within this realm. And then my best friend took me back to our last memory together on Earth. And I was very fortunate that I was in the hospital bedroom when he died. And it's an absolute privilege because often it's such an intimate thing that people will die once there's nobody in the room. You could be there for weeks waiting for the person to die. And as soon as you go off to the bathroom or to go and get a cup of tea, the person will die. But he definitely wasn't ready to go. I remember having a conversation with him because we had the 3 weeks leading up to death, and he was trying to get this for his radiotherapy. He was getting a mask fitted on his brain so they can do the radiotherapy. They didn't even have time to fit that before he died. But he wasn't ready to die at all. He had a fantastic career and he wanted to stay here, which I totally understood. So when I was in that room, I was furious that he died. I was shouting up to the corner of the room saying, please just show me that you're okay. But Brendan had showed me this from his perception. So I was looking down at myself, talking up to the corner of the room, saying, please just show me that you're okay. But I could feel all of my emotions at that time, but I could also feel his emotions from his perception. He literally just died. So I had the feeling that he had just left his body and he was at peace instantly and ready to move on at that time. So you hear about these shared death experiences, and I think that's what I had, but it was almost from a retrospective point of view. So it was very extraordinary and confusing, but it was a very vivid memory that I was shown whilst I was up in that realm. And I'm narrating this in a way that it was in a chronological order, but it wasn't. Everything was just in one go because there's just no time up there. And that's why it's this overload of information that you think must take an eternity for the information that I gained. And it was literally, minutes or seconds that I was potentially there for. And because I had this perception of me, I was then very aware that, well, was I dead? And it didn't bother me at all that I was dead. Then I had the realization that, well, how did I die? Did I die in the club? And you don't have any feeling of guilt or shame. I remember thinking this wasn't ideal. And that's when I had a thought of my family, and particularly of my parents. I actually remember seeing my parents asleep in bed and having this vision of them. And it was that thought that catapulted me back to this earthly realm. Now, when I went to this realm, it was a flick of a switch. It was in an instant. But coming back, I remember coming through the club area and actually coming through the bar area. So my consciousness actually came through the bar in the club, and I went through it as a wooden bar. I remember seeing in the greatest detail the splinters that are in that wood, and even get a sense of what that wood used to be, which was a tree, and I had all of that feeling. Now, when I got back into the club area, there was no sound, and I was very aware that my body was on the floor, but I couldn't see my body as in the physical form. Now, it's difficult to explain, but I was aware that my consciousness would not get into that body form. My consciousness was immense. It was huge at this time, and it was just no way it was going to get back into this tiny body. This was the most traumatic part of the whole experience, because literally seconds ago, I was in this magnificent realm, fully aware that I was dead, but didn't care at all. But now I was on this earthly realm. I was petrified, and I remember it vividly, and even now, this was 16 years ago, having that innate fear of not being able to get my consciousness into my body. And my human body didn't look like this from when I was from my consciousness. It looked even more insignificant. It looked like nothing, because at that time, I can only assume that I must have hopefully looked like what my best friend and the children looked like, with these magnificent beams of energy. And I hope that's what I was, but I didn't have that. I couldn't see what I actually looked like. So you can just imagine how magnificent you are at that time. And then even just to see my body, it just looked so useless. I thought, how am I going to get this into that body? Now, my consciousness was literally undulating back and forth, back into the bar area, into the wood. So I could see that wood again in the greatest detail. And all that scum that accumulates around a bar area, I could see it in the greatest detail. And it's just like waving back and forth. Now, I don't know how my consciousness got back into my body, whether it was through will or intentions, but my consciousness did get back in. And it almost made like a tangible pop of sound that, you know, it's this immense consciousness that had to get back into this, what looked like a minuscule, insignificant body. But it did get into it. And that's when all of my senses were just totally overwhelmed, because I could then hear all the music from the club came on. My face was sore because my friends were slapping my face to try to rouse me. There was security around me. My friends were around me. And I literally just sat up and I said, I've seen Brendan. I've just seen Brendan. And everyone knew Brendan had died months before. So it just looked absolutely crazy. Another traumatic part of this was coming back. It's almost like a post-traumatic distress syndrome, was the time period that I was gone. I was literally out for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but I thought I must have been gone for like a wonderful eternity, if not at least 3 weeks. There was so much information that I was understood and gained. The fact that I was still in this club, it just didn't make any sense to me. And I really grappled with that for a long time to understand the absence of time. And I was absolutely obsessed with this experience for months to come. So I've spoken to my friends about this, because especially after it happened, and I'm still friends with many people that knew that I went through that experience. Talking to colleagues is very difficult. And I worked in a hospital setting for 20 years now. But no, it's a very difficult topic to talk to, because people just shut you down. It's like, you know, they don't believe in it, which is fine. I'm not here to prove to anyone. I've had the most wonderful experience, which was so profound. It's changed every aspect of my life since then. So prior to my NDE, I was a devout atheist. My family were atheists. And then having this experience, it changed everything for me. And I had to believe in that greater energy, in that greater universe, which people will call God or can call universe. But it changed me to a very spiritual person. And I get so much strength knowing that we all have a soul family. So I definitely do pray, and I do believe in the power of prayer now, which I never would have in the past, just because of what I've experienced. That there's no way you can't understand how energy is connected now, and the power that we have for our thoughts. And that's why you have to be so careful not to, when we have an altercation with somebody, you think about the turmoil that you have for days or weeks afterwards because of that altercation. It's just not worth doing if you can have a peaceful life as much as possible. So no, power of prayer, I 100% believe in now.